My daughter gave me $10,000 for my birthday. That night, I found a document, power of attorney. When I unfolded that crisp white paper hidden inside the envelope, my blood ran cold. My own daughter, the girl I had nursed through fevers, the girl I had walked down the aisle, the girl I had handed my savings to without a second thought. She wanted to take away my right to make my own decisions. She wanted to take everything. But what she didn't know was that I had spent 40 years learning how to survive, and I wasn't about to stop now. Good day, dear listeners. It's Isabella again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. Today's story is one that still makes my voice shake a little when I tell it, because it's about the kind of betrayal that comes from the people you least expect, the people you gave your whole life to. My name is Doris Whitfield. I'm 73 years old, and I live in a small brick house on Maple Ridge Lane in Knoxville, Tennessee. It's the same house my husband Earl and I bought in the spring of 1981, back when the dogwoods were blooming, and the mortgage rate was something we had to pray over every single month. Earl was a pipe fitter at the plant on the east side of town. He worked with his hands his whole life, and those hands were rough as tree bark, but gentle as anything when he held our babies. We were married for 44 years. 44 years of pot roast on Sundays, arguments about the thermostat, slow dances in the kitchen when nobody was watching, and the kind of love that doesn't need fancy words because it shows up every single day in the small things. Earl passed away on November 12th, 2019, from complications after a stroke. He was sitting in his recliner, the brown leather one that still sits in the corner of our living room, and he just slipped away while the evening news was playing. I haven't moved that recliner. I never will. Earl and I had 2 children. Our son, Dale, lives in Asheville, North Carolina, with his wife, Patty, and their 2 boys, Mason and Colton. Dale is a quiet man, steady as a heartbeat, the kind of son who calls every Wednesday at 7 o'clock sharp and actually listens when you talk. Then there's our daughter, Vanessa. Vanessa is 46, lives in Nashville, and she was always the sparkly one, the one who walked into a room and made you look. She married a man named Craig Driscoll when she was 25. Craig was a real estate developer, or at least that's what he called himself. He wore tailored shirts and had a smile that could charm the shoes off a preacher. I never quite trusted that smile, but I never said so. Because what mother wants to be the one who poisons her daughter's happiness? Out behind the house, Earl planted a rose garden the year Vanessa was born. Pink knockout roses. He tended them every evening after work, and even now I keep them alive. I water them with the same green hose he used, and sometimes when the wind is right and the petals are warm from the sun, I swear I can feel him standing right next to me. The garden became my sanctuary in the years after Earl died. I'd sit out there with my coffee watching the cardinals hop along the fence, and I'd talk to him like he was still there. I'd tell him about my day, about the grandchildren, about the bills. What I didn't tell him, not until much later, was what his daughter was doing to me. Because I didn't have the words yet. I didn't want to believe it. For the first 2 years after Earl's death, Vanessa was wonderful. She called me almost every day. She drove up from Nashville at least twice a month, sometimes with Craig, sometimes alone. She brought me groceries, organized Earl's tools in the garage, helped me sort through his clothes when I was finally ready. I remember sitting on the bed with her, holding one of Earl's flannel shirts to my face, breathing in the last trace of him, and Vanessa held my hand and said, "Mama, he's still here. He's in every corner of this house." I believed her. I believed everything she said. The first sign of trouble came in April of 2021. Vanessa called me on a Tuesday evening, and her voice had that particular tremble in it, the one she'd used since she was a little girl when she wanted something she knew she shouldn't ask for. She told me that Craig's development company had hit a rough patch. A project in Franklin had gone sideways, permits were delayed, investors were pulling out. She said they needed $15,000 to cover payroll for 2 weeks, or the whole company might go under. Mama, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't desperate, she said. Craig is too proud to call you himself, but we'll pay you back by July. I promise. I didn't hesitate. I went to the bank the next morning, Wednesday, April 14th, 2021, and I withdrew $15,000 from my savings account. That account held the money Earl and I had saved over our entire marriage, a total of $287,000 after his life insurance payout. It was supposed to be my safety net, my peace of mind, my assurance that I'd never be a burden on anyone. I wired the money to Vanessa that same afternoon. July came and went. No repayment. I didn't ask. What else would a mother do? Then in September of 2021, it was another call. This time it was Craig who called, which surprised me. He was smooth, almost rehearsed. He said there was an opportunity, a piece of land in Murfreesboro that could triple their investment, but they needed to move fast. He needed $22,000. He said he'd cut me in on the deal, make me a silent partner. Miss Doris, I know what you've already done for us, Craig said. I wouldn't ask if this wasn't a sure thing. You'll have your original 15 back plus interest. I give you my word. I sent the money, $22,000 wired on September 29th, 2021. Craig's word. That and $1.50 would get you a cup of gas station coffee. In January of 2022, Vanessa called again. This time she was crying. She said their youngest son, my grandson Braden, who was 9 at the time, needed specialized tutoring for a learning disability. The program cost $8,500 for 6 months. She said their cash was tied up in the Murfreesboro deal and they couldn't access it. We can't let Braden fall behind, Mama, she said between sobs. He's already struggling so much at school. You know how kids can be cruel. $8,500, gone by the end of the week. I canceled the dental work I'd been saving for. 2 crowns and a root canal that my dentist, Dr. Paul Emery, had been urging me to get for over a year. I told him I'd reschedule. I ate softer foods and managed the pain with over-the-counter medication and warm salt water. In May of 2022, Craig called again. Another opportunity. Another emergency. This time it was $12,000 for what he described as a tax lien issue that could result in penalties if not resolved immediately. Then in August, it was $9,500 for repairs to a rental property they owned, a property I later learned they had already sold 3 months earlier. In November, Vanessa called sobbing again, saying Craig had been in a minor car accident, and their insurance deductible was $6,000. She said the hospital bills were mounting. I sent every penny they asked for, every single time. I canceled a trip to see my sister in Savannah that Christmas. I stopped buying the organic groceries I liked and switched to store brand everything. I turned my thermostat down to 62 degrees in the winter to save on the heating bill. My neighbor, Helen Kowalski, brought me a blanket one afternoon because she said I looked cold sitting on my own porch. Doris, are you eating enough? Helen asked me, her eyes sharp with concern. I'm fine, Helen, I said, just watching my budget. I wasn't fine, but I was a mother, and mothers protect their children even when those children are adults who should know better. By December of 2022, I sat down with a calculator and a stack of bank statements. I added it up 3 times because I couldn't believe the number. Since April of 2021, I had given Vanessa and Craig a total of $73,000. $73,000. That was more than a quarter of my life savings, and not a single penny had been repaid. Not one. Every promise had evaporated like morning dew on Earl's roses. But I still didn't confront them, because in February of 2023, Vanessa called and invited me to Nashville for Mother's Day weekend. She said she had something special planned, and she sounded so warm, so much like the daughter I remembered, that I let myself believe things were turning around. Mother's Day, 2023 arrived, and I drove the 3 hours to Nashville with a tin of Earl's favorite peanut butter cookies that I'd baked from his mama's recipe. When I got to their house, a sprawling 5-bedroom home in a gated community called Wyndham Estates, I noticed a brand new white Range Rover in the driveway. The temporary tag was still in the window. I didn't say anything. When I walked inside, I saw the kitchen had been completely renovated. New quartz countertops, a 6-burner Viking stove, custom cabinetry. I didn't say anything about that either. I just smiled and hugged my grandchildren, Braden, who was now 10, and their older daughter, Sienna, who was 14 and already taller than me. Vanessa gave me a beautiful scarf for Mother's Day. It had a designer label I recognized from magazines. "Happy Mother's Day, Mama," she said, kissing my cheek. "You deserve the world." I held that scarf and thought about the dental work I still hadn't gotten. I thought about the 62-degree thermostat. I thought about the canned soup I'd had for dinner 3 nights that week. But I said, "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Thank you." I drove home that evening feeling something I couldn't name at the time. It sat in my chest like a stone, heavy and sharp-edged. I know now what it was. It was the first crack in a dam I'd built to hold back the truth. But the dam didn't break that day. It broke on my birthday. My birthday is October 7th. In 2023, I turned 73. Dale called me at exactly 7 a.m., right on schedule, and sang Happy Birthday off-key with Mason and Colton shouting in the background. It made me laugh until my eyes watered. Patty got on the phone and told me they were sending me a weekend trip to a bed and breakfast in the Smoky Mountains. All expenses paid. It was the sweetest thing. Around noon, a courier knocked on my door. He handed me a large padded envelope from Nashville. Inside was a birthday card from Vanessa, cream-colored with gold embossing, the expensive kind. The card read, "To the best mother in the world. You've given us so much. This is just a small token of our love." Inside the card was a cashier's check for $10,000. My first reaction was joy, pure, uncomplicated joy. I thought, finally, they're paying me back. I thought, maybe Craig's business turned around. I thought, my daughter loves me, and she's showing it. I held that check and I cried. I sat in Earl's recliner and I cried like a baby, feeling guilty for every suspicious thought I'd ever had. That night, around 9:30 p.m., I was getting ready to put the card and the check in my lockbox in the bedroom closet. As I was sliding the check back into the envelope, my fingers brushed against something else. Another piece of paper, folded in thirds, tucked behind the check so that you almost wouldn't notice it unless you were looking. I pulled it out and unfolded it under the lamp on my nightstand. The document was typed on legal-size paper. Across the top in bold letters, it read, "Durable Power of Attorney." Below that, in smaller but unmistakable print, was my full legal name, Doris May Whitfield. The document, if signed, would grant Vanessa Driscoll full authority over all my financial accounts, my real estate holdings, my investments, and my medical decisions. There was a yellow sticky tab on the signature line with a small arrow pointing to the blank space. Next to it, someone had written in neat handwriting, "Sign here, Mama." I read it twice, then a third time. My hands were trembling so badly the paper rattled like a leaf in a storm. The $10,000 check wasn't a gift. It was bait. The birthday card, the sweet words, the gold embossing, all of it was just the wrapping paper on a trap. If I signed that document, Vanessa would have complete control over everything I owned. My house, my savings, my remaining $214,000, my medical decisions, everything Earl and I had built over 44 years of marriage, everything I had left to sustain me through whatever years I had remaining. Something cold settled in my chest. Not sadness, not yet. Something sharper, clearer. It was the feeling you get when you've been walking through fog and suddenly the wind blows it away and you see the cliff you were about to step off. I set the document down on the nightstand. I placed the check on top of it. I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the house settle around me, the creaks and groans of old wood that sounded in that moment like Earl's voice saying, "Open your eyes, Doris, open your eyes." The next morning, October 8th, I did not call Vanessa. I did not call Dale. I put on my good navy cardigan, the one I wore to Earl's funeral, and I drove downtown to the law offices of Pemberton and Associates on Market Street. I had known the founding attorney, Gerald Pemberton, through our church for over 20 years, but Gerald had retired the previous spring. The attorney who met me was his daughter, attorney Catherine Pemberton Wells. She was in her mid-40s, with dark hair pulled back in a low bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. She had her father's sharp eyes and his way of listening, really listening, with her whole body. I placed the power of attorney document on her desk. I placed the birthday card next to it, and I placed the $10,000 check next to that. Then I sat down and told her everything, every phone call, every wire transfer, every excuse, every lie. It took me 45 minutes. Catherine didn't interrupt me once. When I finished, she picked up the power of attorney document and examined it carefully. After a long moment, she looked up at me and said, "Mrs. Whitfield, this document was prepared by a notary service in Nashville. It's technically valid if signed and notarized, but the way it was presented to you, hidden inside a birthday card with a financial inducement that raises serious concerns about undue influence and potential elder financial abuse under Tennessee law." She asked me if I had records of all the money I'd sent. I told her I had every bank statement. She asked me if any of it had been repaid. I told her not a cent. She asked me if Vanessa had ever provided documentation for any of the stated purposes: the payroll emergency, the land deal, the tutoring, the tax lien, the car accident. I said no. Catherine leaned back in her chair and said, "Mrs. Whitfield, I want you to do something for me. I want you to go home and gather every bank statement, every text message, every voicemail, every piece of correspondence between you and your daughter and her husband. Print out your bank transaction history. If you have any emails, print those too. Bring it all to me by Friday, and I'll review it. But I want to be honest with you. What you're describing sounds like a pattern of elder financial exploitation, and in Tennessee, that's a crime." I went home and I did exactly what she asked. I sat at my dining room table, the one where Earl and I had shared 10,000 meals, and I spread out every piece of paper I could find. Bank statements going back to April 2021, text messages I'd screenshotted, a habit Helen had taught me when she was helping me learn my new phone. I printed emails from Craig with the subject lines like "quick business question" and "family opportunity." I even found a voicemail from Vanessa that I'd saved on my phone from August 2022, where she said, "Mama, I know we owe you so much, and we're going to make it right. Craig says by Christmas, we'll have everything squared away. I love you, Mama." Christmas 2022 had come and gone. Nothing was squared away. I also did something else. I went on social media. Helen had shown me how to use the internet on my tablet, and I navigated to Vanessa's profiles. What I found made the stone in my chest turn to ice. In July 2022, the same month Craig told me they needed $9,500 for rental property repairs, Vanessa had posted photos from a 10-day vacation in Turks and Caicos, white sand beaches, turquoise water, matching resort outfits. Sienna was holding a smoothie the size of her head. Craig was wearing sunglasses that I looked up online and found cost $450. In November 2022, the month of the supposed car accident and $6,000 hospital deductible, there were photos of a wine-tasting trip to Napa Valley. Vanessa captioned one photo, "Living our best life with the love of my life." Living their best life with my money. I printed every photo. I printed every caption. I printed the dates and cross-referenced them with my bank transfers. By Friday, October 13th, I had a manila folder 3 inches thick. I drove it to Catherine Pemberton Wells and set it on her desk like it was a brick. Catherine went through everything over the following week. She also made some phone calls. She contacted the tutoring program Vanessa had mentioned for Braden. No child by the name of Braden Driscoll had ever been enrolled. She contacted the Williamson County Tax Office about the supposed tax lien on Craig's property. No lien existed. She contacted Craig's insurance company about the car accident claim. There was no claim filed in November 2022. Every single excuse they had given me was a fabrication. On October 23rd, Catherine called me into her office. Detective Luis Padilla from the Knox County Elder Abuse Unit was sitting in the conference room when I arrived. He was a broad-shouldered man with a close-cropped beard and kind eyes that had clearly seen too much of this kind of thing. He shook my hand gently and said, "Mrs. Whitfield, I've reviewed the materials your attorney provided. I want you to know that what happened to you is not your fault. You trusted your family, and they violated that trust. We see this more often than people think, and it's our job to make sure there are consequences." Detective Padilla opened a formal investigation. Over the next several weeks, he subpoenaed Craig and Vanessa's bank records, credit card statements, and property records. What he found was staggering. Craig's development company had actually been dissolved in March of 2021, a full month before the first time they asked me for money. It had gone bankrupt. Every dollar I had sent them had gone directly into their personal accounts, funding their lifestyle, the Range Rover, the kitchen renovation, the vacations, the designer goods, all of it. The Murfreesboro land deal Craig had promised to cut me in on, the parcel had been purchased, but not by Craig. He had never had any involvement with that property. He had fabricated the entire opportunity. The total I had sent them was $73,000. The total they had spent on luxury items and vacations during the same period, documented through their own bank and credit card records, was over $190,000. They had been living far beyond their means, and I was one of the sources funding that illusion. On November 15th, 2023, Catherine Pemberton Wells filed a civil lawsuit against Vanessa Driscoll and Craig Driscoll in Knox County Chancery Court. The complaint alleged elder financial exploitation, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She sought full restitution of $73,000, plus punitive damages, plus attorney's fees. Simultaneously, Detective Padilla forwarded his findings to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. Vanessa called me 3 days later. It was 8:23 p.m. on a Saturday. I was sitting in the living room with the lamp on, reading a library book. Her name appeared on my phone screen, and I let it ring 4 times before I answered. "Mama, what is this? I just got served with papers at my front door in front of my neighbors." Her voice was high and tight, vibrating with fury. "Are you seriously suing me? Your own daughter?" I kept my voice steady. "Vanessa, you lied to me. Every single time you asked for money, you lied. Craig's company was already gone. There was no tutoring program. There was no car accident. You took $73,000 from me, and you spent it on vacations and cars while I was eating canned soup and turning my heat down to 62 degrees. There was silence on the line. Then her voice changed. It dropped lower, became almost sweet. "Mama, listen. There were some misunderstandings, okay? Craig handled the business side, and maybe he wasn't completely honest with me either. But we're family. We don't take family to court. Let's just sit down and talk about this. I'll come up next weekend and we'll sort it out." "There's nothing to sort out, Vanessa, and I know about the power of attorney." Another silence, longer this time. When she spoke again, the sweetness was gone. "That was just a precaution, Mama. You're getting older. We were trying to protect you." "Protect me from what? From knowing what you were doing with my money? You're going to regret this," she said. Her voice was cold now, a voice I barely recognized. People are going to think you've lost your mind. A mother suing her own daughter will have you declared incompetent. Craig knows people, lawyers, judges. You have no idea what you're starting. I know exactly what I'm starting, I said. And Vanessa, don't call this number again unless it's through your attorney. I hung up. My hand was shaking, but my heart was steady. The next 2 months were ugly. Vanessa launched a campaign to turn the family against me. She called Dale's wife, Patty, and told her I was having episodes and making paranoid accusations. Patty, bless her heart, told Vanessa that she'd seen the bank statements and Vanessa should be ashamed of herself. Vanessa called Earl's sister, my sister-in-law Francine, in Memphis and told her I was being manipulated by a predatory lawyer. Francine called me directly, and I told her the truth, and Francine said, "Doris, Earl would burn that girl's inheritance to the ground. You do whatever you need to do." Craig sent me a letter, not through an attorney, but directly to my home address. It was typed on what appeared to be his old company letterhead, the dissolved company, and it essentially threatened that if I didn't drop the lawsuit, they would file for emergency conservatorship over me, claiming I was mentally unfit. Catherine told me the letter was itself potential evidence of intimidation and witness tampering, and she added it to our file. On December 10th, 2023, a Sunday afternoon, I was in the garden watering Earl's roses when I heard a car pull up. I looked up and saw Craig's black BMW parked at my curb. He got out wearing one of his tailored shirts and walked up my driveway like he owned the place. "Miss Doris," he said, all charm, all smile. "Can we talk? Just 5 minutes. No lawyers, no drama, just family." "You're standing on my property, Craig. And you're not my family. You're my daughter's husband. And right now, you're a defendant in a lawsuit I filed. You need to leave." His smile flickered. "Come on now, Miss Doris. Let's not be dramatic. We can work this out. I've got a proposal that I think you'll find very generous. The only proposal I'm interested in is the one my attorney files with the court. Get off my property." He took a step closer. "You know, people your age, they get confused sometimes. They misremember things. A judge might look at this whole situation and wonder if maybe you gave us that money willingly and just forgot. Happens all the time." I pulled my phone from my cardigan pocket and dialed 911. I didn't even look at the screen. I just held it up so he could see. "I'm calling the police, Craig. You have about 30 seconds. He left, tires squealing. Helen Kowalski, who had been watching from her porch next door, came over with a cup of tea and sat with me until my hands stopped shaking. "You did good, Doris," she said. "Earl would be proud." I filed a police report that evening. Officer Tamara Jackson came to my house, took my statement, and documented Craig's visit. She noted it as a potential violation of the no-contact advisement that Detective Padilla had recommended. It was added to the case file. By February 2024, both the civil case and the criminal investigation were moving forward. The DA's office had decided to bring criminal charges against both Vanessa and Craig. The charges included exploitation of a vulnerable adult, fraud over $10,000, and attempted fraud by deception for the power of attorney scheme. Craig was additionally charged with witness intimidation based on his letter and his uninvited visit to my home. The civil trial was scheduled for April 8, 2024, in Knox County Chancery Court, before the Honorable Judge Raymond K. Davenport. Catherine Pemberton Wells spent weeks preparing. She was meticulous, relentless, and calm in a way that made you feel like everything was going to be all right. I will never forget walking into that courtroom. It was a Tuesday morning, overcast, the kind of gray Tennessee sky that looks like a wool blanket pulled over the world. The courtroom had high ceilings, dark wood paneling, and that particular smell that old public buildings have, a mix of floor polish and dust and decades of human drama. Dale had driven up from Asheville. He sat right behind me. his hand on my shoulder. Patty sat next to him. Helen Kowalski was there. Even Francine had driven in from Memphis. Vanessa and Craig sat at the defendant's table with their attorney, a man named Martin Poole from Nashville who wore too much cologne and kept checking his phone. Vanessa wouldn't look at me. She stared straight ahead, her jaw tight, her hands clasped in her lap. Craig, on the other hand, kept glancing over at me with an expression that I think was supposed to be wounded innocence, but looked more like poorly concealed panic. Catherine presented our case first. She was surgical. She put the bank statements on an overhead display, showing every transfer, every date, every amount. She played the voicemail from Vanessa, promising repayment. She showed the text messages where Craig described the fake land deal. She presented the evidence from Detective Padilla's investigation, the dissolved company, the non-existent tutoring program, the fabricated tax lien, the fictitious car accident claim. She showed the social media photos, projected large on the courtroom screen, of Vanessa and Craig on the beach in Turks and Caicos, dated the same month they told me they couldn't afford rental property repairs. Then she held up the power of attorney document, the one hidden in my birthday card. "Your Honor," Catherine said, "this document was concealed inside a birthday card, accompanied by a $10,000 check designed to create a sense of gratitude and obligation. A sticky note on the signature line reads, 'Sign here, Mama.'" This was not an act of family planning or elder care preparation. This was the final step in a calculated scheme to gain complete financial and medical control over a 73-year-old widow who had already been defrauded of $73,000. The courtroom was silent. I could hear the fluorescent lights humming above us. Martin Poole, Craig, and Vanessa's attorney, tried his best. He argued that the money was given as gifts, that there was no written loan agreement, that family members help each other all the time without expectation of repayment. He argued that the power of attorney was a routine estate planning document and that Vanessa was merely trying to help her aging mother prepare for the future. Catherine dismantled every argument. She called me to the stand, and I testified for over an hour. I described every phone call, every lie, every sacrifice I had made. I described the canceled dental work, the cold house, the canned soup. I described finding the document in the birthday card, the yellow sticky tab, the handwriting that said, "Sign here, Mama." My voice broke only once, when I talked about Earl's recliner and how I used to sit in it and wonder what he would think if he could see what was happening. Catherine also called Detective Padilla, who testified about the investigation findings. He confirmed, with documents, that every stated purpose for the money had been fabricated. He confirmed that Craig's company had been dissolved before the first request. He confirmed the luxury spending documented in their bank records. Judge Davenport listened to everything. He was a silver-haired man in his 60s with reading glasses and a deep, measured voice. When both sides had finished, he took a brief recess and returned with his ruling. "In 40 years on the bench," Judge Davenport said, looking directly at Vanessa and Craig, "I have seen many forms of betrayal, but there is something particularly egregious about the exploitation of a parent by her own child. Mrs. Whitfield trusted her daughter. She gave freely, generously, and repeatedly, because that is what mothers do, and that trust was weaponized against her." He paused and adjusted his glasses. "The evidence in this case is overwhelming. The defendant systematically defrauded Mrs. Whitfield of $73,000 through a pattern of deliberate lies and fabricated emergencies. The attempted use of a durable power of attorney, concealed inside a birthday greeting and accompanied by a financial inducement, represents a calculated attempt to gain legal control over the plaintiff's assets and person. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. He ordered full restitution of $73,000, plus $45,000 in punitive damages for the pattern of fraud and emotional distress, plus $18,500 in attorney's fees and court costs. Total judgment, $136,500. He further ordered that Vanessa and Craig were prohibited from contacting me directly and that any future financial transactions between us had to be supervised by a court-appointed fiduciary. Vanessa broke down in the courtroom. She put her face in her hands and sobbed. Craig sat rigid, his jaw working, his face the color of old cement. Martin Poole patted Craig's arm and began gathering his papers. I felt Dale's hand squeeze my shoulder. I heard Helen whisper behind me, "Justice, Doris. That's what it sounds like." But the civil judgment was only half of it. The criminal case proceeded separately. In June of 2024, Vanessa and Craig were both indicted by a grand jury. Craig, facing the more serious charges including the intimidation count, was offered a plea deal. He pled guilty to 1 count of exploitation of a vulnerable adult and 1 count of fraud. He was sentenced to 18 months of probation, 200 hours of community service, and was required to attend a financial crimes accountability program. Vanessa pled guilty to 1 count of exploitation of a vulnerable adult. She received 12 months of probation and was ordered to undergo counseling. The consequences cascaded after that, like dominoes falling in slow motion. Craig's real estate connections, the ones he had bragged about, evaporated overnight. Word spread through the Nashville business community that he had been convicted of defrauding his own mother-in-law. Clients disappeared. Partners distanced themselves. The couple's home in Wyndham Estates, the 5-bedroom showpiece with the Viking stove, was put on the market in August 2024 to help pay the judgment. It sold for less than they owed on the mortgage. The white Range Rover was repossessed. Craig's BMW was sold. By October of 2024, exactly 1 year after I found that document in my birthday card, Craig and Vanessa's marriage had collapsed. Vanessa filed for divorce. Craig moved to a studio apartment in Antioch. He took a job managing a storage facility. The man who had worn tailored shirts and $450 sunglasses was now wearing a polo with a company logo and answering complaints about unit sizes and gate codes. Vanessa moved into a small rental house in East Nashville. Sienna, who was now 15, told her mother she wanted to live with her father's sister until things calmed down. Braden, now 11, was quiet and confused. Vanessa's friends, the ones from the wine tasting trips and the resort vacations, stopped calling. Social media went silent. The woman who had captioned photos with "living our best life" now had no photos to post at all. I saw Vanessa once, about 4 months after the trial. It was a Saturday afternoon in August, and I was at the Kroger on Kingston Pike buying peaches. I turned down the cereal aisle, and there she was, standing with a basket that held store-brand pasta and a single can of tomato sauce. She looked thinner, older. Her hair, which had always been salon perfect, was pulled back in a plain ponytail. She was wearing a t-shirt I didn't recognize and jeans that looked like they'd been washed too many times. She saw me. Our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she opened her mouth like she was going to say something, and I saw her eyes fill with tears. I didn't speak. I didn't approach her. I didn't look away either. I just stood there, holding my bag of peaches, and I let the silence say everything that needed to be said. Then I turned my cart and walked to the checkout. I felt nothing. Not triumph, not pity, just quiet certainty that justice had been served. And maybe, beneath that, the faintest ache of a mother's heart that would never fully stop caring, even when caring was no longer safe. The money from the judgment came in installments, managed through the court. By January 2025, I had received the full $136,500. The first thing I did was call Dr. Paul Emery's office and schedule the dental work I'd been putting off for 3 years. 2 crowns and a root canal. When he saw me in the chair, he shook his head and said, "Doris Whitfield, you're the most stubborn woman in Knoxville." I told him I preferred the word resilient. I put $50,000 back into my savings account, rebuilding the safety net that Earl and I had spent a lifetime weaving. I set aside $20,000 in a trust fund for Mason and Colton, Dale's boys, to help with their college expenses. They were good boys, polite and hardworking, and they deserved a grandmother who invested in their future. I used $15,000 to renovate the kitchen, not with Viking stoves and quartz countertops, but with a new dishwasher that actually worked, fresh paint in a warm yellow that reminded me of spring mornings, and a sturdy oak table where I could spread out my jigsaw puzzles without worrying about wobbly legs. I donated $5,000 to the Knox County Elder Services Program, the same organization that Detective Padilla had told me about during the investigation. They provide resources and support to elderly people who are being financially exploited by family members. I asked if they could use a volunteer, and they said they'd love one. So every Thursday morning now, I drive downtown and sit with people who are going through what I went through. I listen to their stories. I hold their hands. I tell them that they are not crazy. They are not ungrateful, and they are not alone. I tell them that standing up for yourself is not a betrayal of family. Sometimes it's the most loving thing you can do because it stops the cycle. Catherine Pemberton Wells became a friend. She and her husband invited me to their 4th of July barbecue, and I brought my peanut butter cookies, Earl's mama's recipe. Catherine's little girl, who was 7, declared them the best cookies she'd ever eaten and asked if I could be her honorary grandmother. I said I'd be honored. Dale and Patty drove up for my 74th birthday. We didn't go to a restaurant or have a big party. We sat on the back porch while Mason and Colton chased lightning bugs in the yard, and we ate cake that Patty had baked from scratch, chocolate with cream cheese frosting.